And there's only one thing that I don't think that we spoke about, but maybe you learned about this in the chassidus, so you tell me, where it says that they couldn't find any oil because the Yevonim made all the oil impure. All they found was one small jug of oil, and even that was actually miraculous, because how come they didn't make that impure? So it says that this jug of oil somehow fell down, it rolled under the floor, and it was like in a certain corner, it was covered, so they didn't notice it. When they were searching, they found it. Did you learn any sikha, anything about what this means? That they found a small jug of oil? No. Okay. I always said if you didn't learn it, that's very good. So I have what to tell you. Otherwise, I'd be out of business. Well, based on the things we learned before, which is that in that time, because there was such a big darkness and such a big challenge, the only way they were able to overcome that challenge in those days was through mesiras nefesh, which means they were ready to put their life on the line. And that, where does it come from? Where does a person get the strength to do something like that? So we said that comes from the yichida. That comes from the part of the neshama, which is the fifth level of the neshama. That part of the neshama is bound to Hashem with an unconditional love, meaning it's a love that transcends logic. Generally speaking, love is something which is based on logic. There's a reason why I love this or I love this person. There's something there about it that makes me feel good. And that's the way it's supposed to be logically. The only example that we have of a love that's really, truly unconditional is like the love that exists between people that are related to each other. That because they're inherently one, so therefore they love each other. And that's in essence the love of the neshama to Hashem. The neshama is chelik of the kamibal, and therefore the neshama loves Hashem in general. But just like we learned about Hashem, that in essence Hashem is above logic. He created logic. Hashem himself is Ein Sof, is infinite. The neshama also has a certain aspect, which is really the essence of the soul and the deepest part of the soul. That's also sort of a reflection of that infinity, and therefore its love for Hashem is unconditional. That's the place in the soul where all this comes from, the strength for a person to do something that is not rational, that's above seichel. There are things that are not rational that are below seichel, but this is above seichel, that's mesiras nefesh. So these words, number 8 on the list, where it says, they found only a small jug of oil. It was laying on the floor with the seal of the Kohen Gadol, which means that even though they made everything impure, there was one little thing they could not make impure. There's one little thing that there's no impurity in the world that can get to it. And what is that? That's the yichida. And that was the small jug of oil that they found, meaning to say, it's similar to like we say about Moed Ani. Remember we spoke about Moed Ani. Why do we say Moed Ani before we wash Nevelasa? The reason it's given in Shulchan Aruch is because we do not pronounce Hashem's name. So you don't have to wash Nevelasa. But we ask the question, wouldn't it still be better if I'm davening to Hashem, even without pronouncing his name, first wash Nevelasa, get the impurity off your hands, and then daven? Why should I doctor say a prayer to Hashem with impure hands? No, what was the answer?
You're bursting with joy.
Like even higher, it's like a level.
When a person wakes up, I know what you want to say. You got the right answer. You got the right answer, you just don't have the words.
Yeah.
So when a person wakes up in the morning, those moments of waking up, that's when the yichida, the essence of the neshama is shining. The connection is with what is yichid? Yichid is the source of the soul, the essence, the core. When I wake up in the morning, that's also the essence and the source and the core of my day. It starts with waking up in the morning. That everything else that happens later, that's the outcome of waking up in the morning. But the main thing is the waking up in the morning. I start my day.
What if you forget to say Shema the night before, still? You know what I'm saying?
But then what?
Then maybe the Yechida is not so strong?
The Yechida is just as strong. The Yechida can be weaker. There's nothing that in the world that can make the Yechida weaker. The only difference is how conscious I'll be, how much I'll feel it consciously. But in itself it can never be affected whatsoever.
But how long does that moment last? It's just a moment? So you
That's why some people like gotten very late, so that moment should continue for more hours.
so many things for a drink of water.
This is not oil. This is simple water. Generally speaking, it's the morning. It's the time of Shacharis. That's the time. But of course, it's the moment we wake up. That moment, and that's why we datka make the ani without washing our hands, because that is a manifestation of the fact that this is something that there's no impurity in the world that can affect it in any way.
Oh.
So we datka do it with Talmudic hands. Here also, Timu kol hashmanim shebehechel. They made all the oil tamei, which means they could impure and they can affect and they can contaminate different levels. But that essence of the soul, that little jug, that they couldn't find and that they couldn't make impure. In fact, there's another thing. The bottles of oil had a seal on it. The seal, if it wasn't broken, means that no one touched it. But it didn't have to have a seal from the high priest. Could have had the seal from any kohen that would put a seal on it, which means that nobody used it, nobody tampered with it. So that's also connected because just like there are 5 levels within the neshama, nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida, there's also different levels in Yidden. There's Yisrael, and there's Levi, and there's Kohen. And even though in even Kohanim there are different levels, the highest level is the Kohen Gadol. That corresponds to the Yechida. So both of them indicate that what was the source of what sort of brought back the huge flame was that little Yechida, which is there, was ignited. And once that's ignited, then everything happened from there, and they got the basic English back. So to a certain extent, we always say only once a year the Yechida becomes Nisgala. That's on Yom Kippur. Then when it comes to Simchas Torah, we say on that day the Yom Kippur Yechida comes Nisgala in a different way. Comes to Chanukah, we say only in Chanukah. So apparently the Yechida is always there, but there are certain times in the year where it manifests, and every time of the year it's a different kind of manifestation. But that's Hanukkah also. It's a time with the Yechida is Galus.
Also something about like the oil the other Kohanim used versus the oil the Kohen Gadol used was like the Kohen Gadol didn't have to use like olive oil, and what like he that specific Kohen Gadol himself like went higher and like he was just like the oil he didn't have to use, but then that was the oil.
I know what you mean. I think it means something else. I know what you mean. I think that's what you mean. Where it says that according to halacha, they could have used impure oil to light the menorah.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's halacha. If the whole community is tamei, everybody is tamei, then you're allowed to. If everything is tamei, everybody's tamei, you could use tamei. So therefore, why did he have to make the effort to look for something that's pure? There are different answers given to it, but I guess according to chassidus, the answer was because they wanted to find that yechida, because that, in other words, the physical finding of the oil and the miracle that followed was a manifestation of what happened spiritually, and the yechida in the inn opened up, and with that spread, they were able to overcome the enemy. And remember, we said the war was a spiritual war, not a gashmic war, and the war was with Yavan, who was the epitome of chokhmah. So with Chokhmah, they couldn't beat them. With Chokhmah, they couldn't overcome them. They had to have something deeper than Chachma to overcome. And what is that? That's the Yechida. The Yechida is the part of the Neshama that corresponds to that aspect in Hashem, which is higher than Chachma. And who has it? Every one of us have it. Just one more interesting thing I want to mention about Hanukkah that I think we'll maybe try to start the new Maimon. And that is, I think everything else I'm looking, I think we touched on it, we explained it. And that is that it says in Rashi and Chumash, and it's found in other sources, Rashi brings it from other sources, that when Hashem created the world, the light that was shining was so bright that you could see from one end of the world to the other end of the world. Hashem said the world isn't ready to receive such a bright light. So he put it away and he hid it. And when will it be revealed? When Mashiach comes. Where did he hide it? So the one source that says Hashem hid that light in Torah. And that's why they're great tzaddikim, that sometimes when they wanted to know something about what's going on another end of the world, they opened up a book of Torah, looked in it, and they saw what they wanted to see. So me and you can't do that, but the tzaddikim were able to do that. There's another opinion that says that it was actually hidden in the lights of Hanukkah. Meaning that the lights of Hanukkah has in it this hidden light that was hidden from the times of Hanukkah, from the times of when Hashem created the world, and therefore these candles and these lights are very, very powerful. Again, just like we don't see it in the Chumash, we don't see it in the candles. But I do remember that was very interesting. One of the historic things that happened by the Rebbe was the Rebbe always has a rally for children on Hanukkah. After communism fell, before communism fell, they had a rally, and this rally was to connect people in Israel, in Hong Kong, in Australia, in France, in America, from many different countries. But they said it was the first time they did something like this, that people from here was able to hear people out there, and people from there were talking, and you can hear them over here, all interconnected. The next year, 1992, that was the year that communism fell. So they had something like this year also, but that was the first time in the Kremlin. You have to understand, the Kremlin was the source of the Klippa. That was like the house of Pare, the source that fought Yiddishkeit and everything that goes along with it. And yet, that became the place where they had a video of the Rebbe speaking about strengthening Yiddishkeit, and they hosted it. That's the Rebbe interpreted this as part of Mashiach also. But the interesting thing was that this was the only case where we know that you can actually see from one end of the world to the other end of the world, and it was the lights of Hanukkah. They lit the menorah in 770. They lit the menorah by the wall in Yerushalayim. They lit the menorah in Hong Kong, in Australia, and in England, and in France, and the whole world could see everybody's Hanukkah lit. So it was like a physical manifestation of the fact that the lights of Hanukkah shine from one end of the world to the other end of the world. Someone told me that I don't know if you know the way these things work, but the technician, they have like 13 screens from each country. And they choose at each moment which image they want to be on the central screen that everybody sees. We don't see all 13 at the same time. So they have to be in that room, and they like what's going on now, so they show you the Rebbe, then they show you friends, then they show you Yerushalayim. So at one point, they were singing a nigun, and the Rebbe was making with his hands. And the technician said, "Wow, I got the chills." He says, "What happened?" I don't know, this rabbi waves his hand, and I'm looking at 13 countries around the world, and everybody starts jumping, and dancing for one wave of a hand. Okay.
Wow.
So let's make a haskalah. It's connected to Hanukkah. We'll start. It's also connected to Hanukkah, actually. What is it? It's a maimer from the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said this Maimer on Yud Aleph Nissen, but it's one of those Maimer that the Rebbe edited. And we're also fortunate that this Maimer was translated with a good translation in English. And the Rebbe's birthday is on Yud Aleph Nissen. So we know, and we just finished talking about it, that on Hanukkah we read how each Nasi brought a carbon each day. That means they brought a carbon the first day was the tribe of Yehuda. The second day was the tribe of Yisachar. The Rebbe's birthday is the 11th day of Nisan. So who brought a carbon on the 11th day? It was the tribe of Asher. So the Rebbe said a mimer on that pasuk that talks about the carbon that Asher brought. Yem Ashtei Asher, that's how the mimer begins. So maybe I'm gonna go find it and someone help me bring it in. We have the actual books. They're here already from before. No, they're not. Yeah, it's in a small room. Who wants to help me?
Yeah. Huh? It's not, it's like this. Fine, I'm so sorry. Going out with I haven't even moved barely, it's just blown and hurt. I don't know why, also like healthy this week. If you want to have chickpeas, I don't know, 19, I'm too scared to get it. Drink water and food. Flush them. Wait, I'll fix some still.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the Sefer. The book is Masichs in English, Sefer HaMaimorim, Lessons in Sefer HaMaimorim, that's what it's called. And it has in it this mimer, which is B'yein Ashtei Osa. Which page is it? It starts on page page 184. Okay, so the first thing is we'll take this references, look at the pasuk in Chumash. There you can see the pasuk in Chumash, and the whole Maimon is based on. Which says, "B'yei Mashtei Asar, on the 11th day, Nasi Lebnei Asher, who brought the carbon, the Nasi of the sons of Asher, meaning the Nasi of the tribe of Asher. What was his name? Hagiel ben Ochran. Hagiel, the son of Ochran." And people ask, how come we don't have children with names like these names in the Chumash? There's no kid called Hagiel, Ochran. I don't know the answer. Some of them we have, Yehuda, Naphtali, but some names. Okay. Isa b'medrash. So we're going to read from underneath the line in the bottom part, where you have the English translation. But I'm reading it in Hebrew and translating it in English. On the 11th day, the prince of the tribe of Asher, the Nasi, he brought this offering. Remember I told you yesterday that every Shevet, they're different. The Medrash brings down different kavanas, different meaning and significance of their carbon. They all brought the same things, but for each one, there's a different explanation. Why? Because each Shevet draws down a different light of Hashem, because it's a different path. So it says over there like this: Kol Hashvatim, all the tribes, the Shem Gulos and Shal Yisrael, they were given names that reflect Geula, and also the Shem Shvachim, and they were given names that reflect praise. Same with Asher. Asher Nikr Shmei L'Shem Geula Shal Yisrael. The word Asher is associated with Geula. Where do we see that? K'mod Tema, there's a pasuk, V'ishru eschem kol hagoyim, and all the nations will praise you. Kitiu atam eretz chayfetz, because you will be a land of desire, of pleasure. Amar Hashem tzvoi, so said Hashem, who is the commander of the legions, meaning that's one of the ways we refer to Hashem as the commander of the army, so to speak. Well, Hashem shvachon, and the word Asher also, that's obviously when Mashiach will come. When is there be such a time that all the nations of the world will praise the Yidden when Mashiach comes? So we see that the word Asher is associated with Geula. Page 185, L'Shem Shvachon, it also is associated with praise. Asher, because where do we find that it has the praise of the Yidden? There's a pasuk, which we all say in Ashrei, Ashrei Ham Shekoch Haloi, Ashrei Ham Sheshem Elokov. Fortunate is the nation whose lot is this. Fortunate is the nation that Hashem is their God. So we're talking about praising the nation, Yidden. So the word Asher has both praise for Hashem and Geula and praising Yidden. Then the Medrash continues on and says, this is all from the Medrash. Ein Ishurun Shel Yisrael. What is the good fortune of Yidden that we say, wow, they're so fortunate? The reason why they're fortunate, they chose Hashem, that Hashem should be their God, versus other nations that chose other things, not Chas v'Shalom, not Hashem. They chose the sun, they chose the moon, the constellations, idols. We chose Hashem. And therefore, Kishaban Nasi Asher Lahakriv, when the tribe of Asher came to bring his carbon, Hikir Karbana, so when he hid the carbon, what kavana did he have? Remember, every Shevet had different kavana. Hashem Abchira, he was thinking about the choice. Shabachar HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Yisrael Mikol Umetz. The choice that Hashem chose Yidden from all the nations. Kimad Tema, like it's written, B'chor Bachar Hashem Elokecha, Hashem chose you, that we should be his cherished nation. So here we have that, these two psukim here in the references. The first pasuk where it says that Yidden are a desired land, that's in Malachi. You can see that on page 14. That's the pasuk. V'ishro eschem el kol hagoyim, yisiyu atam eretz chayfetz Am Hashem tzvois. The pasuk Ashram Shekach Haloi is an Ashrei, but where did that come from? Tilin. That's on page 15. And on page 16, you have this pasuk where it says, and Hashem chose you to be cherished or treasured nation amongst all the nations of the world. So the Rebbe asked a question, which maybe some of you thought of as we're reading it, that the Medrash begins with one thing but concludes with another. Tzarech lahavin. This needs to be understood. The Chilas ha'inyan Omer, when he starts, he says, "Yishurin shel Yisrael." Why are Yidden fortunate? Shebacharu b'Hakadosh Baruch Hu, because they chose Hashem. That's why they're fortunate. Turn the page. The fact that it continues and Hashem chose them, that looks like, okay, that's a secondary point. But the first words that he says, why are we fortunate? Because we chose Hashem from everything else. But after that he says, what does Arsha mean? The Yidden have a good fortune, and that's what they brought the carbon. But what was it about? That Hashem chose them. It should have concluded, and that's the reason why it's a good fortune, because they chose Hashem. So first he says, our good fortune is that Hashem chose us. And then he says, our good fortune is that we chose him. So which is it? That's question number one. Question number two. The term free choice and choosing in its true, pure meaning is only when you're choosing between two things. Because if the two things are not identical or equal, then in essence you're not choosing. The choice has been made for you before you even started. So if I have a job that I could earn $100 a week and have a job I can earn $500 a week, it's not even a choice. $500 has an advantage over 100, so of course that's what I'm going to choose. So when do we say that the fact that I take this because I chose, meaning that there's no reason why I should choose it. There's no advantage in A over B. Whatever A has, B has. So why did I take this? Only because I chose something about this draws me to A, so I chose A. Otherwise, it's not really my choice. It's the choice already made for me because there's an advantage in one thing over the other. Or another possibility is that one has an advantage and the other doesn't have. But the other thing has an advantage that this one doesn't have. So I have to choose which advantage is more important to me. That's when you're dealing with other things. When you're dealing with Hashem, and you're saying you're choosing Hashem and not any other God, how could we say that you didn't chose Hashem? First of all, there's nothing that's equal to him, and there's nothing in the world that has an advantage over him. So it's like the choice has been made. If there's something that's worth millions of dollars and something that's not worth, and you choose it, it's as if it was chosen before you even chose it. How could you choose something else? Being that Hashem has all the qualities that Hashem has, and nothing else in the world is equal to him, it's not choosing. Again, of course, you're choosing this over that. What it means to say is the word choosing means that the basis why I take A over B is because this is my choice. But in a case where there's an advantage, or in a case where there's nothing else that's equal to it, it's as if it's not my choice. The choice is already sort of predicted before you even choose. I know what you're going to choose because it has this advantage. The same question is regarding how HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose the Yidden. Yidden, in essence, come from a different source than all the other nations, which means that Yidden lichatchila, to begin with, their neshama is superior to all other nations. So what does it mean that Hashem chose the Yidden? It's not the same. This is a neshama, like it says in Tanya, from Chochmah or from Ein Sof, and other neshamas come from different sources. So again, it's not equal. So in Tanya, he actually addresses this question. And there's a famous chapter, Tanya, chapter 49. And the Alter Rebbe says that when it says Hashem chose us, it's mainly the neshama in the guf. Because from the perspective of the guf, we all look equal. Everyone has the same guf. Everyone has the same guf. So the Rebbe asks a question on that too. When it says in Tanya, when it says you chose us from all the nations and all the tongues, the Alter Rebbe says it's referring to a guf achumri, the guf which is physical and material, hanidbe mechumer yusei, and it appears outwardly that the physical body resembles the bodies of the nations. So that also needs an explanation. Why? Because the truth is, it's not like that. Even the guf of a yid has a certain advantage to it than the guf of all other nations, because this is the guf of a yid, and therefore, it's also has an advantage. The fact that it looks like it's the same, that would be an answer for a human being, not for Hashem. The fact that it's nidba b'chitzonis, that it resembles outwardly to the guf of the nations of the world, it doesn't explain when you talk about Hashem, but he doesn't go by the way things look, he knows the truth. So if he knows the truth, there's an advantage both in the neshama of a yid and there's an advantage in the guf of a yid, even though with the neshama it's very obvious, with the guf it's not obvious, but to Hashem it's clearly obvious. So what does all this mean? Page 189. Here's where the Rebbe begins to explain. So this will be understood by first prefacing. It says, Chel ki havaya omra nafshi. This is a pasuk in Eicha. You have it here on page 17, where it says, Chel ki havaya omra nafshi. Hashem is my portion. That's what my soul says. Hashem, you are my portion. And that's why I have hope in you. What does it mean, Hashem, you are my portion? So the Medrash explains it with a mashal. We always said that when you give a mashal, that means there's something very, very deep there. That's why it needs a mashal. But we're going to focus on the mashal first. Mashal Lamelo, there was a king, Shenichas LaMedina. Apparently he was traveling, and he came into a new country. He had with him different officers. I don't know the difference in English, but one is the duke. They translate prefects, commanders. In other words, people that had a high position in the kingdom. One is called Duchsen, one is Aperchen, one is Tachtrolun. So when he walked in the new country, one of them said, Anon Nasiv Duchsen, I choose the duke. That's why I want to connect to myself. The other one said, I'll choose the other guy, that officer. That's the one that I choose for myself. And the third one said, I'll choose the third one. The ones that are called Istar Titlutin. There was one person who was really smart, and he was perceptive. And he said, I'm going to choose the king himself. Why? The Kulam is Chalfan, all these other officers and ministers, they could be replaced. But the king is not replaced. So therefore, why choose one of the ministers? I'll choose the king himself. What's the mashal? The nations of the world, there are those that they worship the sun. And there are those that worship the moon. Then there are those that worship the constellations, the mazalas. That's the mashal for the three different officers, three different ministers: the sun, the moon, the constellations. Aval Yisrael, but the Yidden the Yidden choose Hashem. They're like that smart person that says, "I'm not going to choose a minister; I'll choose the king himself." And that's what the pasuk says. My soul says, "I'm choosing Hashem Himself. That's my portion." That's the medrash. Now it begins to explain the medrash. It's well known, the question on this medrash, The Melech said there was somebody very smart, and he said the right thing. I'll choose the king. You don't have to be so smart to choose the king. I feel even a young child knows that the king is greater than the other officers, than the other ministers. Why do we need wisdom here to choose the king? It's as if this is something very deep and very complicated. You need a real smart person to say, I'll choose the king over the ministers. Anyone understands, even a child will tell you that the king is better than all the ministers. He's the one he's the boss. That's number one. The Gam, to make this question even stronger, the reason that he chooses the king, because he says all the other ministers, they could be replaced. The king could decide one day, I don't want you as my minister, like we had in the Chumash with Paray. He had a minister that's in charge of the drinks, a minister in charge of the bread, and one day decided to put them into jail and replace them with someone else. So a minister is someone that is hanging in there depending on the king's mood. But the king himself is not changed. What do you need that reason for? Even if you don't give it that reason, why can't you just say the king is greater than everybody else? Especially based on that which is known in reference to the pasuk where it says Meshichma or Lamaila Lavay Mekala. This pasuk is in I guess where's in Shmuel when it's talking about choosing Shaul as a king. So it says that he was very tall, and from the shoulder and up, he was higher. His shoulder reached other people's head. Other people's heads reached his shoulder. So the simple pshat is that he was very tall, and other people, their heads reached his shoulder. But there's a deeper meaning to the words. Page 191. Shagam Shichma Shalamelech. Basically, the shoulders represent midos, because the right shoulder leads to the right hand, that's chesed. The left shoulder leads to the left hand, that's gevura. Is the highest point in the chesed and the highest point in the gevura. So it means Hamid the midas, the emotional attributes that come from the brain, and then they also branch out to lower things. The midas of the king are so much greater that they're greater than the intellect of the other people. And what does it mean, the other people? Not just the nation. It's even greater than the ministers and even the biggest ministers. How can you understand that? I would just think of an example that we can use is humans have much more quality than animals. Would we say that the humans' midas have more quality than animal seichel?
A deep question.
In other words, the quality of life of a human being is so much greater than the quality of life of an animal. It's a lower form of life. A human being is a higher form of life. But therefore, not only the man's intellect is greater than an animal's intellect, but even the emotion of a person is a higher form of life than the intellect of an animal. And nachazach, animals don't really have intellect. There is something there. Even the Gemara says that a shual, a fox, is called the smartest of the animal.
Really?
Fox? You didn't know that?
No.
Pikach shebachayis.
לא הייתי חושבת שזה פקס.
Don't start up with a fox. Yeah. So what is it? It's a different form of seichel, a different form of intellect. We'll have to leave that for next week. What?
One person has bad midos.
Every person what?
One person has bad midos.
Even if he has bad midos,
It's still higher quality.
the quality of life, the form of life, like let's say a person has seichel, and he's using it in a bad way. It doesn't change the fact that seichel is something which is, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, to be continued with the show. Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Thank you very much. What?
לחיות אין בכלל שכל?
There is a certain element of seichel b'chayot, but there's no seichel amiti. That's what שאני רוצה להסביר.
Okay.
What?
Are
לא אני, not me. Yeah.
you in a rush?
I'm going to teach now.
You sure you're feeling very cool?
I'm going to teach the other class.
For 2 seconds?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I went to Harley-Davidson. This is my grandmother and grandfather, my father's parents. Even though we still legitimately. It's them. My grandfather's parents were killed in Auschwitz, so the brother